Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, the majority leader and minority leader in the Senate, speaking from the Senate floor today on the continuing resolution which would pertain to a potential government shutdown, the debt ceiling, and the Build Back Better plan, otherwise known as the stimulus package. I wanted to lay this all out because these two guys were in the Senate speaking on the floor today, and I want you to be able to hear a little bit about what they were saying. Now, full disclosure, this is not everything that they encompassed in their speech. However, I did listen to everything that they had to say, and I pulled out the pieces that I thought were most relevant to what you may want to hear right here on this channel. So again, this is both of these guys today speaking from the Senate floor. So if you haven't done so yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button right down below the video. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, and I want to make sure that you're staying tuned. So with that being said, here is a clip. It's only a few minutes long of both of these guys speaking, one right after the other, and they're talking about these issues that I just laid out, and this should probably give a little bit more clarity as to what I've been talking about recently in some of my videos today and yesterday. So with that being said, I'm gonna have these guys come in, they're gonna add the clip there, and then I'll catch you again later in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you soon.
We'll keep the government funded beyond the December 3rd deadline. As soon as tomorrow, the House is expected to take action to pass a CR that will fund the government into next year. Senate Democrats are ready to pass this legislation and get it done as quickly as possible. To avoid a needless shutdown, Republicans will have to cooperate and approve the government funding legislation without delay. If Republicans choose obstruction, there will be a shutdown entirely because of their own dysfunction. We cannot afford to go down that road. As winter begins, the last thing Americans need right now is an avoidable, Republican-manufactured shutdown that will potentially harm millions of federal workers, harm their families, and harm local communities that rely on an open and functioning federal government. Democrats are going to work all week to make sure no government shutdown comes to pass, and we urge our Republican colleagues to work with us. On debt limit. Also, Mr. President, soon the Senate must take action to assure that the United States does not default on its sovereign debt for the first time in history. I recently had a good conversation with the Republican leader about this issue, and I expect to continue those talks on achieving a bipartisan solution to addressing the debt limit. By now, we know the dangers of an unprecedented default. Secretary Yellen has warned that failure to extend the debt ceiling would eviscerate our economic recovery and says our country could yet again slip into, quote, a deep recession. Both parties know that this is simply unacceptable, and so I look forward to achieving a bipartisan solution to addressing the debt limit soon. And finally, Mr. President, on Build Back Better. Before we hit Christmas Day, it's my goal to have the Senate take action to debate and pass President Biden's Build Back Better legislation. This week, Senate Democrats will focus on continuing to meet with the parliamentarian so we can finish making the technical and procedural fixes necessary for reconciliation. Once that is complete, it will be time to bring Build Back Better here to the floor of the Senate. I've said many times before that nobody should expect legislation of this magnitude to be easy. We've been at the task for several months. But we need to take a step back and recognize that we're hopefully less than a month away from enacting on the largest investment in American people we've seen in generations. Here's what we're going to do in this bill. Lower the cost of child care. Make pre-K universally accessible. Cut taxes for parents and working and middle-class families, and take the next bold step in our fight against the climate crisis. All this we want to tackle before the Christmas break, so we'll keep working this weekend until we get it done. I yield the floor.
Yesterday, a bipartisan majority of senators rejected the Democratic leader's effort to shut down debate on the National Defense Authorization Act and block new measures. We need the same kind of normal, robust, bipartisan amendment process that always characterizes this bill, and we need the Democratic leader to stop trying to block the Senate from sanctioning Putin's cronies. Now, on an entirely different matter, 88% of Americans are concerned about inflation. Most of them are very concerned. 77% of Americans say inflation has affected them personally. We have a big and diverse country. It's hard to get that many Americans to agree on anything. But President Biden did promise he would unite the country, and on Democrats' watch, under Democrats' policies, the American people are united in their fear and frustration at runaway prices, falling purchasing power, and all the consequences of inflation. The men and women of this country are spending 20% more than last year for beef at the grocery store, 50% more to fill up the gas tank, 26% more for less choice in used cars. One recent article in the New York Times suggested that perhaps Americans should forget about trying to buy their family members normal gifts and settle for exchanging handwritten promises to tackle household chores, such as washing out the reusable plastic bags. I guess the Grinch is doing some ghostwriting in his spare time. Some weeks back, the White House press secretary tried to laugh off reporters' questions about the supply chain and inflation crisis. She literally laughed at the idea that anybody would be worried about, quote, the tragedy of the treadmill that's delayed, end quote. Well, the president's staff are yucking it up, but working parents aren't laughing. Middle-class families aren't laughing. A Kentuckian named Mike Halligan isn't laughing either. He runs a big food bank in Lexington called God's Pantry. They distribute more than 40 million pounds of food every year to local pantries all across my state. Here's what he says. He says, we've seen the cost of our sharing Thanksgiving basket go up this year by 14.5%. We've seen our costs go up about 50%. The transportation component of that is literally doubled. And he also explained that since inflation is also hammering his contributors, charities and nonprofits may face donor fatigue at precisely the time they cannot afford a fall off. The Democrats' inflation is hitting literally every part of our society. A famous economist once said that inflation is the only form of tax that can't be levied without any legislation. But what's remarkable about 2021 is that Democrats did directly legislate a big chunk of this inflation into existence. It is unusually traceable to deliberate policy decisions they have made. One of the most famous Democrat economists in the country, Larry Summers, tried to warn them. On February 4th, he wrote the Democrat stimulus could, quote, set off inflationary pressures of a kind we've not seen in a generation. He said the same thing all springtime long. So did President Obama's CEA chair, Jason Furman, said that the American Rescue Plan is definitely too big for the moment, stating, I don't know of any economist that was recommending something the size of what was done, end quote. But Washington Democrats had already decided months ago they'd try to use the temporary pandemic as a Trojan horse for permanent socialism. Remember last spring when one of the senior-most House Democrats called it, quote, a tremendous opportunity to restructure things to fit our vision. Or earlier this fall when President Biden himself said the pandemic, quote, does present us with an opportunity.